Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the section on volunteer management.
Let me introduce you.
Okay.
I need to introduce you to the community, okay?
Of course, thank you, sir.
All right, we're so excited to have Glory Ogwegbu. Incidentally, it's one of the members of the American Center, Lagos. I remember vividly well the first time she came over, and we can see quite a lot of progress. It has made remarkable progress, and we're happy that she is doing that. I will read a bio to all of us to listen to, and then I will ask her to begin the program. Glory Ogwegbu is the founder of Glow. Sorry, somebody just knocked me out just now. Okay, she's the founder of the Glow Initiative for Economic Empowerment, under whose environmental program, Climate Smart Nigeria, promotes climate change education in Nigerian institutions and provide capacity building on renewable energy technologies. Glory is a founder of the Renewable Energy Technology Training Institute, RETI, now RETI Virtual University, Africa's first online university that aims to provide easy access and affordable solar and renewable energy education. A best-selling author of 5 books promoting the learning of climate change and renewable energy for higher educational institutions and entrepreneurs. Glory is also a recipient of several local and international awards, including President Obama's Mandela Washington Fellowship Award 2015, the Young Energy Professional of the Year Award by Nigeria Energy Awards 2018, among others. In April 2019, Glory was selected as one of the 15 African female business leaders to attend United States government's launch of OPIC 2X Africa. With this, she is going to be leading us into the module for volunteer management as part of our training package for NGOs in Nigeria. As you all know, we started this about 2 months ago, and we're looking at concluding by January this year. So without much ado, I would like to invite Glory to please take it off from here. Glory, over to you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Mr. Samuel. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. And Mr. Samuel is very right when he said that, you know, I really started out at the library. I've been a member since 2015. That's nearly 8 years now. And Mr. Samuel has really been a good guide to me, you know, all these years. When I started my organization newly, I learned a lot about volunteering at the American Center in Lagos. He recommended courses for me, and I like to thank him for, you know, being a part of my success story. And I'd like to thank you all for being here, and I think that the reason you're here is also because some of you are members of the American Spaces. I'd like to encourage you to keep it up. You can learn a lot. Like I said, the American Space is one of my biggest motivation. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about volunteering, and I think it's a very important subject because of my own story. Indeed, this was how I started my story. But thinking about it, what is important about volunteering? I know that most of you know that volunteering is about lending your time or supporting an initiative, but is it much more than that? And what can you do? How can you get ready as an organization to lead a volunteer-powered program? And how can you yourself get ready to become a volunteer? that is intentional and for impactful programs, because volunteering is indeed it's going to be a very important part of your success story. So this is just a little brief of what we're going to be studying in the next 4 sessions, starting from today. So as an introduction, I'd like to play a video which contains 4 short series of videos, about 3 minutes, to give a background. I'd like you to please pay attention so that you can understand why people volunteer and what organizations can do to attract quality people for volunteering. I think I'm aware that most of you here and that are in the physical American corner and that are joining online are already leaders of your own organizations. Some of you are already volunteers. Some of you are planning to start volunteering. Some of you have experience in volunteering. So I like to keep your questions and get ready to have an impactful moment. So please, Mr. Samuel, I'm ready for the video now.
Can share from here. You need to stop the share.
Oh, yes, of course. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Franco, and this is Attracting and Motivating Volunteers. In this lesson, we will discuss how to motivate volunteers to join. We'll explore how to create a fulfilling and positive volunteer experience, then how to collect feedback so you can make improvements and see what you're doing well. And finally, how to keep the volunteers engaged after they've been with your organization. Why do our organizations need volunteers? Volunteers help our organizations make an even bigger impact. Many of our institutions simply wouldn't be able to survive without the support that volunteers provide. In order to attract people who are willing to invest their time, we have to first learn what inspires them to serve with us. What are they hoping to accomplish? Once we know their expectations, we must live up to them or risk losing our volunteers. How to attract volunteers? It's in our DNA to want to help others. Some people come forward right away, ready to give. For others, it takes a bit more coaxing. It is important to create a volunteer experience that is meaningful, and demonstrating the impact a volunteer can make is the first step in attracting quality people. Work hard to create a positive environment so that people want to join the team. Once you know what kind of participation you're able to provide, begin seeking out volunteers. What avenues of communication does your institution have at its disposal? Can you use social media and seek out volunteers on Twitter or Facebook? You can send out a monthly newsletter in which you can advertise for volunteers, or you can create flyers and hang them on community boards in your neighborhood. Reach out for people who have volunteered with your organization in the past. Make sure your advertising conveys accurately the volunteer experience and that it highlights the aspects you know will be attractive to people. How to keep volunteers motivated. It is important to make sure your volunteers' time is well spent while they are working at your organization. Remember that they may not be as experienced as your full or part-time staff members. For that reason, make sure to be available to answer their questions. Provide support, extra training, and encouragement. Take time to teach them about the impact your organization is making so they feel a connection to the work they're doing. Providing a positive experience for your volunteers and keeping them engaged during their service is key to making sure they come back and work with you again in the future. How to keep your volunteers engaged. After the volunteers' time is over, talk with them about what they liked and what they didn't like. Collect their feedback from a survey. Work hard to learn from the negative comments so that in the future, the volunteer experience can continue to improve. Once a person has volunteered with your organization, work hard to keep them engaged. Keep them on your mailing list. Invite them to volunteer in the future. Encourage them to invite their friends to the next event. Volunteers are an invaluable resource. Working hard to attract volunteers and motivating them to want to serve with your organization can help it grow and have a greater impact. After you've completed all the units in this course at yali.state.gov, you can test your knowledge and earn a Yali Network certificate.
So there's another video. Okay. All right. Mr. Samuel, are you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay.
There were
The
there were other
second one, yes,
Yeah.
the second one is inspiring community participation.
Yes, please. We can play the
Alright.
second one, and then the last two can be played at the next session, next week, on
Alright.
Thursday, sorry. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, just 1 minute. Okay, now I play it right away. All right.
I'm Jeff Franco, and this is Inspiring Community Participation to Solve Local Problems. In this lesson, we will learn why it's important for you to know your community and its needs before you inspire them to act, how to overcome apathy or lack of interest from community members, and how to build and maintain momentum once you've started a project. First, knowing your community and its needs. It is critically important that you get to know your community intimately. What are its greatest issues and challenges? Why do they exist? Do your research and learn about the causes of the problems. Become an expert on the issues and then ask yourself, what would it take to solve these problems? Think big and think creatively. People are inspired to act when there's a clear vision and they believe you have a plan of action. Do your homework. Come up with a plan that is going to work. You will only be effective at inspiring others to act if you are clear about the problem you're trying to solve and how to go about solving it. It can be a challenge to inspire community participation and overcome apathy. It's your job community to act. There are many reasons why community members choose not to participate. For example, there can be personal barriers. People may feel they lack the skills or knowledge to make a difference. Or there's a lack of ownership. People feel the problem is not theirs to solve, that somebody else will take care of it. There are many creative ways to inspire community participation, and each one starts with understanding community members and their motivations. You can trigger these motivations to create a personal link between the community member you want to engage and the issue you're trying to address. For example, if you're working to improve schools, you can reach out to parents in the community and inspire them to get involved. You could appeal to their emotions as parents, drawing a connection between the students you're serving and their own. A second strategy for inspiring community participation is to motivate people around a vision of what's possible. Inspire them to think big. Help them imagine what is possible if they work together. Describe what could be achieved if the community came together and solved the problem you're trying to address. It's likely that your audience will have a limited view of what's possible if they haven't given the problem or solution much thought. Inspiring them to think big and be part of transformational community change might be enough to motivate them to act. Another strategy for inspiring community participation is to invite everyone to be part of finding the solution. Rather than propose a solution yourself, ask all the stakeholders to come together to discuss the problem and collectively find a way to solve it. By increasing the level of community participation in the process, you're increasing community buy-in and likelihood that they'll see the project through to the end. When people feel involved in the process, they are more likely to stay involved for the long term. Once you've inspired the community members to act, your next task is to maintain that momentum, keep them motivated. This can be especially challenging when you're working to address big problems that can take weeks, months, or even years to solve. It can be easy for community members to become uninterested or disinvested in long-term projects because they may feel they aren't seeing results. Celebrate small victories throughout the process to show people that they are making a difference. You can share statistics about how many people your project has served or how many people are involved. Or you can share personal stories about the people you have served and how your work has enhanced the community. In addition, make it easy for community members to stay involved. Don't lose the momentum you gained from the start. Continue to create and communicate opportunities for the community. Incredible things can happen when communities come together to solve problems. Invest your time and energy into inspiring community participation, and I know you'll be amazed by what's possible.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Samuel, for helping us to show this video. I hope that you have learned something, everyone. So over the course of about the next 45 minutes to an hour, about an hour, we're going to discuss this. And I want it to be interactive. So I'm going to be asking you from time to time to share something with me, maybe on the chat box or on the floor, because I'd like to see how we can test how you can practicalize what you're learning, right? As young people who are leading small organizations, who some of you are not able to employ people, I want you to take something away from this program, how to design projects that can be powered by volunteers, what to look out for. There's an old-fashioned belief that we know about volunteers. We just feel volunteers are people who want to work for free. I started my own organization as well in 2013 as a youth corper. So you can imagine being a corper and trying to run a program. Of course, I don't have money to employ a team, right? And so I had an old-fashioned belief at the time that volunteers are just people who want to work for free. But I was wrong, because I got to learn a little bit the hard way that it's not quite like that. How can you put strategies in place to get the best volunteers and also impact the lives of volunteers? We're usually always thinking about what the volunteers can do for us. From the lesson, you're going to understand how you can, first of all, set up your organization to be ready to attract volunteers. So I'll share my screen right away and we'll get to it. Remember to keep your questions for me about confusions you might have about the subject matter. So let's go, volunteer management. So I'm going to go right ahead and show you what the goals and objectives of this lesson is, and we will shoot right in. Please let me know if my slide is going to the next page, because sometimes the slide would not be going to the next page. So I want to see if it has gone to the next page. Can someone confirm for me, please? Okay, so.
Task.
Thank you, sir. Yes. So Unit 1, volunteer program design. What do we mean? We mean that as organizations, you want to plan programs. How are you going to involve volunteers in the program that you're planning? And I think that this is a very timely project because it's important to understand what is needed. What do you need to put in place as the organization? It's important to think about your organization instead of thinking about only the volunteers that you're bringing on board. Right, so go to the next page where we'll talk about the objectives of the program, of the session, excuse me. So it's important to determine whether a community is ready for volunteers, right? So your organization that is trying to launch a program in this community. So are you really ready? Are you ready as an organization? And is the community as well ready to receive this volunteer managed program that you want to run? We're going to share examples as the program runs, right? So you're going to learn from this session what is necessary for planning volunteer run programs. So it's like also saying in planning planning programs where you don't have paid employees working on it, where you just have all these different parts filled in by volunteers instead of paid employees, right? So by the end of this unit, you're going to be able to design an appropriate needs assessment, right? Because as an NGO or as a community-based organization working in a community, you need to understand what the needs are, right? What the needs are, what specific program do you want to target? You will also learn how to determine who should be included in the needs assessment. So taking in several tools for consideration from the community, number of women, a number of unemployed, land spaces available for training. Depending on the project that you want to run, you have to do an analysis, a needs assessment analysis. So figure out how to select the solution, how to identify the problem you want to solve, and how to design the solution for that problem. At the end of the session, you should learn how to explain the difference between a goal and an objective. You should also learn how to develop goals and an objective. Okay, yeah, I said that. How to develop goals and objectives for volunteer programs. And you will learn how to write a volunteer job description. My happiness about this program is also that many of you are familiar with something like this, but so today you're going to really take away a better way of doing it, right, than you have always done. So we'll go to the next page, where we're going to talk about assessing the organization and community needs. You're a new NGO or a social entrepreneur, and you are in this new community where you have identified a problem. Now, a lot of young people, I'll tell you, always really just go forth immediately and try to solve the problem they've identified. There are a lot of active young people, especially in Nigeria, there are a lot of active young people who quickly try to solve these problems. But what do you need to do first before you solve it? For an example, you are a youth corporate or you're a young person who has been posted by your office to work in a different community, right? And you just notice in this community a pattern, a trend. You have your little NGO that you started running when you were in a youth service, and you notice a problem. You know, leaders are people who identify a problem. I'm going to tell you 4 things that leaders do, because it's important to lay that background as we try to drive home this message, right? Leaders create positive change in communities. And a leader does 4 things. You know, through these 4 things, you're going to know a leader. A leader identifies a problem, designs a solution, executes a strategy, and ignores the rejection. I'll say that again. A leader identifies a problem, designs a solution to the problem, then executes the strategy or implements the solution, and ignores the rejection. I can also add a 5th point there to say that a leader builds a team to solve the problem, but that is it's not relative to everyone, because not every young person who's trying to create change can create a team, right? So, and you go into this community and you find a problem where you notice the pattern that pregnant women usually die during childbirth. And you begin to look into the problem. Now, as a young person trying to design a volunteer program, you need to conduct a needs assessment, firstly, to understand why this problem is happening. Yeah, to understand why this problem is happening. And so if you have a little startup where you have members of board, right? Let me tell you, when I started my own NGO as a corporate, I hadn't actually registered the NGO when I conducted that community-based project, right? So you see, it was just me, but I did something I believed was smart. I don't know if I should say smart, but it's something very important you should do. Make sure to hold meetings. I try to bring on board the king of that community, right? To tell him about what I have observed in this place. Because as leaders, you can never do it alone. Learn how to carry along people and stakeholders in that community. So bring those stakeholders. I also work with the church. in this community, I identified widows who were really poor, and some of them were living outside, some of them were sleeping outside. In the daytime, you see them littered across the street, sitting down on the road. And I began to think, what can I do to solve this problem? How can I take initiative? Leaders take initiative, right? So remember that we're talking about how you and your community-based organization can organize a volunteer-powered project. The things you need to think about and the things you need to do first. So you must bring together the stakeholders in the community. You can think about the king of the village. You can think about the leaders of the church groups. In my story, I found that the women that I identified were members of the church and were the members of the mosque as well, right? So I went and spoke to these different stakeholders because they had a very big influence on the women and on the rest of the community, yeah? So I brought them on board and I talked to them. I did have an idea of a solution, but I shared it with them first. So I brought these people together and we also chose representatives from the widows, right? We chose a representative from the Christian side and from the Muslim side. The reason I'm sharing these details to you is because of how you need to bring together stakeholders in your project. Let's take, for instance, that your project wants to do with unemployment. You have to bring stakeholders together that have to do with members of the community who are leading groups, maybe church groups, Christian women organization, youth empowerment programs. There are always small groups like this in communities. Bring them together and brainstorm a solution. Never try to execute your solution alone. Many young people try to do that. And usually when they do that, they meet a head. They may not meet a headway initially, but during the implementation, they may meet some rejection from the people because they think you're trying to impose your idea on them. No matter how beautiful and good the idea you have is, make sure that you plan it with the people of the community so that they can feel a sense of ownership, like we heard in the video in the past. So I'll tell you what happened with mine before we move forward. I talked to those people I just told you about, the king of the community, the religious leaders, then the representatives from the different classes of the widows. Now, guys, before I realized that I needed to do this, I did not have any volunteer training, yeah? I was just a copper. You see, during my time, I did not have the opportunities that you have now. I did not have videos like this to watch. There were no courses online. There weren't a lot of things the way that there is now. So I just tried to do it the way that I thought was best. Now, I just had a nice idea for what to do for those widows that I saw. You see, they had cassava in abundance, and I wondered why these people were poor. Cassava is a staple food in our country. So imagine large-scale processing of cassava. It's going to employ all the 200 widows, because I noticed that the community were exporting cassava. Every afternoon, I saw large vehicles coming to take multiple cassavas from the farm to Lagos and to different places. Now, the reason that I'm sharing this story with you, I'm sure you know, is to tell you my story and how I properly organized a project that was impactful, yeah? So, I decided to build a cassava processing factory that will process cassava large scale so that the women can export the products, gari and starch. So, but now I made a little mistake, and I'll tell you because you need to learn from that. I did not know the importance of involving the stakeholders. I only told the king about my plan, and then he gave me a land to build my factory in. This was in 2013, right? He gave me a land to build my factory in. Then I began to raise funds for my program. But I had this nice idea. I have designed the solution that I wanted because I thought that this solution is what they needed. They are poor and they needed jobs. And also when they process the cassava, they can take food from it as well. So food for community members, you know, I was really happy with the solution I came up with. It was a good solution, but during the time that we started purchasing equipment for the factory, I made one big mistake. If I had spoken to the widows, before this time, I hadn't brought the widows into the question. So I purchased an equipment that was not functioning well. And so one of the widows said, you should have told me when you wanted to buy this. A member of our community can construct a local one that is even more functional and can do it probably for free because it's a project you're doing for us. And he can deliver that equipment that works because he has done it before. And I almost cried. Because the one I bought was, I think it was the fake one. It was sold to me and it was very expensive. It was very expensive industrial equipment. So it was sold to me as a new one, but we later found that it was not really exactly new. And then I realized the mistake that I made. Why didn't I think about talking to the women? Hello, it's important to talk to them because they can tell you where the shoe pinches. They can help you fine-tune the idea. Remember that you're doing this project for them. So I was trying to set up a cassava factory for the same women who will run it and process cassava and sell. I learned a very bitter lesson. Remember that I didn't take a course or watch the video or participate in the training like you are now. So I didn't know that I was supposed to do that. Make sure you don't make that mistake, okay? Involve them, and involving them is a lot more. It's not as simple as just saying involve them. Ask them for contributions. Review and brainstorm ideas with them. Ask them what the outcome will be if we do it this way, or what the outcome will be if we do it that way. Try to converse and communicate so that ideas can come out of your conversations, right? So that's the number one mistake that I made because I did not properly do my needs assessment and community stakeholder engagement, right? Thankfully, we were able to fix that problem because we then engaged that local community member they told me about. You see, when volunteers want to go to communities to do something, we have this way of thinking that all they need is just help. They need help, they don't have water, they need help. So let's just provide help for them because they don't have water and they just need this help. And then we just push our solution into the place. We forget to actually hear from the people, learn from them, and figure out how to implement a solution that works. Before I go on to my next slide, I will tell you another quick story because I want you to imagine how this thing works. I want to share different perspectives so that you can think about it in a proper way. I am in the clean energy sector, renewable energy and solar power. There's a lot of conversation around clean cooking because of climate change. Women who use, so what's that thing called? Firewood, yeah, to cook. Women who use kerosene stoves to cook are at a risk, at a big health risk, right? I met a woman who turned blind in Lagos, Nigeria, because of smoking fish, all of that smoke that goes in. Remember, we're talking about thinking about your community projects. Now, I want to share an example about the importance of stakeholder engagement. There are a lot of foreign initiatives for clean cook stoves. Clean cook stoves, I'm sure some of you have heard it before. Stoves that when you cook with, it does not emit as much carbon, or it utilizes biofuel, which does not emit as much smoke, yeah? And those stoves are believed to be healthier, of course, because, I mean, they don't produce CO2, or they produce just a little bit of CO2. I've come across an initiative that, created these clean cook stoves for those women in the communities. Because of course, it's a better idea. I mean, with this stove, you won't inhale carbon. With this stove, you will lead a healthier life, and you can stay away from risks that come with inhaling CO2. But those projects were big disasters. I'll tell you for free, big disasters. Do you know why? Some of them consulted the women. I want to lay a background and say that the women who cook with firewood, it is a traditional exercise, please. Many women here will know, can also confirm it as well, that it is a traditional exercise. Many of the women learn these strategies from their mothers. And so it has been passed down from generation to generation. And so it is not going to be exactly easy to change, especially without involving them. So, I've seen a project where they supplied those clean cook stoves and the women did not use it. So that organization came back after 1 year to do a M&E, and they just found the stove somewhere growing grass. Grass is just growing on it. Do you get what I mean? Because you did not consult them to figure out a solution that can help them. You must allow the stakeholders and your beneficiaries to tell you what they want. Your role is to then use what they want to then, infuse it, integrate it into your solution and come up with a better plan, right? So that you don't implement a project that the people will not use. You don't donate clean cook stoves, and the women just continue using their firewood, right? So that's a quick example of not involving committee members. I've shared 2 examples now with you. My own story where I bought a bad fake product without knowing that the women that I was trying to help could actually do it for me and do it well. When you involve stakeholders in your project, or when you set up a strategy for how to involve them, you get their buy-in. Now, they feel like they own the project. I've heard about scenarios where solar power project was implemented for a community, maybe a volunteer-based type of project. And the community members destroyed the solar panels. There was a video that went viral recently. So it showed a large field where they had solar panels that was powering the community's water source, right? We also saw community members who climbed on top of these solar panels and were breaking it. They were also chanting. They were chanting a song. They tied things on their head. They were breaking it. Later, we heard that they said the people who came to put that project has offended their gods, G-O-D-S, offended their gods, so that this is unwanted, they don't care. So you see the big mistake of not consulting, of not carrying stakeholders along. And as we're going further, I'd like you to actually share examples with me that you know, where you've seen things go astray because the planners did not involve the community members. So we'll shoot right ahead. Whilst you're trying to conduct your needs assessment, you have to include stakeholders. That's what I've been trying to explain all this time. And then maybe your friends, of course, you don't have staff, but include people from the community. If you're a youth corporate, include some people from your youth corporate group, and tell them to plan for you, to plan with you, excuse me. So that is what you should think about when you're trying to plan your volunteer program. Now, when you bring all these people together, they're able to understand where you are as a small organization and what you can do, what powers you have, what your fellow core members can bring to the table, the kind of knowledge base that you have to execute the program, and who can work with you on that. So when you finish this needs assessment, you kind of get a very clear picture of where you are at the moment and what you can do, which is something that most people looking for volunteers don't actually do. They just call the volunteers to come and there is no structure. This is very important. So I'll go to the next one, where we're going to talk about some of the questions you need to come up with whilst you're designing that needs assessment that you have to do for your community-based organization. So some of the questions you can ask: do the organization's purpose and activities meet these communities' needs? Or am I just trying to solve one random problem, because I want to make it different and I just want to solve this problem, because it's important to be a leader? Yes, that is good. Do your own values and purpose and goal, does it align with your organizational values? You have to ask that question. You have to ask if your organization have a value statement that is reflected in its activities and communicated by its constituent. That one is very similar to the first one that I said, right? But you have to, your constituents are the people you serve. For instance, those community members where you're based. If you belong to a religious sect or a religious organization, your constituents are the people that are in that religious space. So that's an example that you're serving, the people you're trying to train, the people you're trying to provide assistance for. So you have to determine if your organization value is in alignment with what the constituent believe that you do. All this is important, but at first it doesn't look important, but it's really important for the your long-term process of building traction. In the long term, your funders probably would want to see how you've maintained alignment in your work and how you're not just doing one-off projects. A lot of young people who run NGOs are guilty of doing one-off things, right? They're guilty of doing one-off projects. And so this has caused some of those organizations to appear unstable or to appear, what's that thing called? To appear confused, because You do have a nonprofit organization, but you just do this project here, commemorate this day, do different pieces of things all together. Your solutions to your constituent must align with your value proposition. Don't forget that. The next thing you have to think about, you have to have the board and staff develop, you have to ask the question, have the board and staff developed and adopted a written strategic plan to achieve the mission of the organization? So let's think about it this way. As a small, because I know that some of the listeners are people who are just young and you've not really built that traction, but you hope to, or you've done a little project and you're hoping to make it better. So maybe you don't already have a strategic plan. It's not a big deal. All you need to do is to bring out from your head what you want your organization to be doing. Let me tell you an example. As a couple, I started my nonprofit, like I told you guys, and I did not have a lot of knowledge. I just wanted to do good in the community. But eventually, another thing that helped me to think strategically about my project was the Mandela Washington Fellowship, because that year I also applied and I was just new to the whole thing. But trying to answer those Mandela Washington Fellowship questions did something to my head, honestly. So many of my mentees now that I'm talking to about the fellowship, I'm also who are not ready to really apply because they don't have the experience. I'm telling them to try and apply. Try and stress yourself to answer those questions. You don't know what you're doing for your nonprofit or for your organization. You're helping to bring out of your head what you really stand for, and you're putting that down. You're communicating what you really. So that was what really helped me. Of course, I was not selected in the first time I applied because I don't know if I just tried my best. But I told myself that I was going to make it the next year. So I used the next 1 year to really put myself together. Yeah. And I got in that next year. So the point that I'm trying to bring out here is that you have to have a little plan. So, because when you say business plan or strategic plan, it sounds heavy. So many people are running away from it. Personally, I don't even like things that sound really heavy or have to be in pages. I try to be real. Just bring out the idea out of your head and write down 5 things you want to do, you want to be doing. For instance, when I started my organization, I did a project which provided a cassava processing factory to benefit 200 widows who could then be engaged, process the cassava, package it, send it up to the market. That project made a lot of money that people were asking me if I really left this thing for these widows. So Glory, you mean that you left this thing? You're not getting any money from this. So what I then did when these women were making money is that we set up a microfinance scheme so that they can start lending to each other, to one another. Right, so that's just out of it. But what I'm trying to say is that I try to write these things down. I try to write down what I want my nonprofit to do. I want my nonprofit to harness local economic resource, right? If you notice in the first community, I said that there was a local resource, cassava, that they had in abundance. Think about it like that. Think about your solutions like that, yeah? So I wrote it out that I wanted to harness these communities' local economic resource. Then I started to put down how I wanted to do that. So if you have not done that for your business or for your nonprofit or for your NGO, you need to do that. Like I said, it doesn't have to be hectic or really big or bogus. All you need to do is to bring it out from your head and write it down. Write 10 things you want to do. What is your overall goal? And that brings me to something called the essential question. Wow, I almost forgot that. That's the first question. What is your essential question? This question is supposed to be a question that when you answer, it just provides you with what you're supposed to do. So for instance, for my cassava program, my essential question could be, how can I support 200 widows in this community and a livelihood and become better members of the society? An essential question is meant to urge you to think of answers that can target the very question that you have asked. I encourage all of you to write down your essential questions. It's even the beginning, right? See, that's the beginning of you creating a very impactful volunteer program, because you need to figure out what you're all about. If there's some time, I'm going to ask you all on the chat box, those that are on the chat box, that connected via Zoom, to write down their essential questions for me on the chat box. Think about the work that you're doing. What problem are you trying to solve, really? Let us start from there. Before you bring volunteers into your work, you have to figure out what you're doing. Not just knowing a vague form of it, but specifics. What problem are you trying to solve? How have you thought about solving it? Yeah. And have you implemented a strategy before? How did that work? So 4 things: what problem you're solving, what solution are you proposing for the problem? Have you ever implemented a strategy? What was the impact of that thing you implemented? So I'd like you guys to prepare your essential questions. I'm going to ask you to write on chat box so that you use to evaluate the work that your organization is doing. So moving to the next one, there's also a question here that says, does the organization evaluate its activities annually to determine progress towards accomplishing the goals? So this is like working on an annual report for your NGO. Not everyone have done this or can do this, but I'm trying to say it is something to ask about when you want to run a project where you want to bring other people, because the people you're bringing into your program need to see the value that you're giving, right? So for people who don't have an annual report yet, I suggest that you start working on it. Just very simple projects you did in a year. What projects have you done in that year? If that is your first year, that's okay. If you don't have a project you've already done, good. Bring it out of your head and write down what you want to do so that your volunteers can connect with it and figure out how that helps them. I mean, how that connects to their own visions and goals. Volunteers have to see that there is something you're offering that they can connect to. I started with volunteers as well. And some of my volunteers have now turned into full-time staff now, 5 of them, right? I started with these guys and volunteers. In fact, at the time, I didn't even have money to pay them. And so they've actually worked in the business, in the NGO, and they've grown with it. About 2 of them have gotten several awards, you know, because of the work that they do in our organization. Their skills have improved because I offered them that platform. I made sure, because I couldn't pay these guys, let me tell you something else that's important. Because I couldn't pay them, I made sure that there was some value they were getting. Now, this is a real time, like this is, I'm being real with you now. I couldn't pay my volunteers at the time. Eventually, I had a funded project where I could pay them for about 2, but before that, about 1 year, I was not able to give them any money for their work, right? But I looked at other ways that I could help them, including recommending them for opportunities, reviewing their applications, advising them of their lives and other things, paying their transport, of course, if we have physical events, intentionally looking for platforms for them where they could thrive, right? Buying courses for them to study, to get better, not at my work, but to get better generally. Volunteers need to see that you care about them. I'll tell you that for free. And I have a very dedicated group of people that work with me. I think it's because of how I invested into them. Remember, I didn't give them money. So it's not about money. Because sometimes I used to sit down and think about how lucky I have been with the kind of volunteers that I've had. Remember that we're talking about how you can attract volunteers and organize your organization to attract good volunteers. So when I think about it, I think, what exactly did I do? I thought about it, and then I remember I created a platform for them where they could see their goals. They thought that if they volunteered here, it can somehow help them achieve their personal goals. I did not make it about my organization. That's another thing to know. I made it about the overall common good. I made it look as if we're all solving an overall problem. And I always linked our solution to their passions. I know their passions. And that's why I was able to reach them in the first place. I know that some of them want to do the things that I want to do. So we kind of have similar goals. So they see a future with my nonprofit. They see a future for themselves with my nonprofit. So if you cannot offer volunteers money, think about intangible things that you can do for them. I was
So let's be patient with you. I think our network is acting up.
I hope that you learned something from there. But okay, so
Yeah,
these are the questions you need.
Sorry, Glory, we lost you at a point. I think you need to, at the point where you said if you can't offer them money, we should offer them something tangible. Yeah, the network acted up there.
Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Thank you for informing me. Okay, yes, I was saying that because of how interested I was into the lives of my volunteers, it made them very dedicated. Because I know that so many of you here cannot afford to pay volunteers if you don't have a funded project. Think about other intangible ways to support your volunteers. Give them platforms to shine. I created programs where my volunteers could lead. I gave them, according to their work, I gave them good roles that they could use to apply for. You see, many of them have really gotten awards and done many big things. 2 of them have gotten other bigger jobs, right? So think about something else you can do for your volunteer, right? So moving on, you have to ask yourself when designing that community needs assessment, are stakeholders involved in the evaluation process? Like I said, I made the mistake of not involving stakeholders. So it's very, very important to involve the stakeholders in the community process. And I hope that you're beginning to draft your essential questions for me. Don't forget, draft your essential question for me in the comment box. What is the question your initiative is asking? What question or what problem are you solving, right? So I will get to that soon. And then the next thing you need to think about is the people you're working with. Of course, there are many of you here who do not have staff, but look at your life. I mean, look at your community of your area of influence. If you're a copper, look at your copper friends. If you are a young person in the community, look at the community members. You have to bring them on board. Do they have sufficient training? And right now we're talking about the organization, right? Do they have sufficient training for that project you want to do, right? What do your constituents want? The people in the community, what exactly do they want? When you think about a question like this, you'll be able to think of a solution to that thing that they want. Now, how many people are you going to reach in your program? For my program, I reached 200 widows. But eventually I saw that the project we conducted spread across the entire community. So what you will learn in your project is that your solution will always spread far and wide. But at the time you're planning, you won't really know because you don't really know how things will turn out, right? So my own program really went far and wide. And in fact, people from outside the States became interested in our cassava factory. So you have to initially think about those that will benefit from it in advance so that you plan properly. So that thing you want to do, has any other person provided it? Maybe you want to tackle unemployment. Is there an unemployment scheme already in the community? You have to think about this, and if there is, see how to work with those people. So then moving on, basically rounding up now. I don't know how much time I have. I think I still have up to 30 minutes. Then
yeah, you still have the program ends by 1 actually.
Okay, let me see the time. Oh wow, okay, 1 hour, good. Okay, we have a lot of time. So we can talk about the essential question because I want you to write your essential question for me in the chat box, right? We want to talk about that because it's a good background to have. So after you have determined that needs assessment and you've asked those important questions we just talked about, then you need to create goals for that project. It's very important for you to write out what you want to do, the goal, right? What is that big thing you want to do? For me, in my project, it was to create a cassava processing factory that will employ 200 widows and to also enable them start a microfinance scheme. That was what I had in mind. In fact, the microfinance scheme was not there initially. It came there after I saw the progress of the initiative, and the program was featured on the TV and all of that. And I saw that they were making, in fact, they told me that they were making a lot of money and they bought things for me, you know, bags of rice. That Christmas and New Year, they bought bags of rice and things to share. So I told them to begin to think about how to start micro lending because some of these videos, their children are out of school. So how can you start micro lending from the money you're making in factory so that you can start supporting some of the orphans in the community, right? So we actually set up a group for them. Before I left that community, I set up a leadership structure, a president, a vice president. We formed an association, Shawo Widows Association. Even though some people said, oh, should widows have association and all of that. You know, that was some of the rejection I faced in the project, because you're going to face opposition. Yes. See, don't think that because you're doing a good thing for the community, you won't face opposition. You will usually face opposition. Either that some of them will ask you for money, thinking that you've gotten money from somewhere, or they will actually tell you that they don't need it and that what you want to do, want to disrupt the gods in their community. So I don't know if some of you have had interesting things that community people told you. That is some of the things you come across. And as a leader, you have to figure out how to address that. Instead of leaving the community, oh, these people, I'm providing water for them and they're asking me for money. You people don't know that there are people without water. Let me just go and do it for another community. You're not serious. Do you do that, or do you use dialogue to explain to them, right, about what your project is about, the problem that it's solving, and how they benefit from it? I'll tell you an example of that. It's very important whilst you do your community engagement project and, you know, building that volunteer program, that you know some of these things that might happen, so that you think about it in advance and figure out solutions for it. Yourself and team must brainstorm possible oppositions or resistance in that community. It's very, very important. So before I go into, since we have more time, before I go into developing your goals and objectives, let's talk a little bit about an example of how you can meet opposition in the communities where you're trying to design a volunteer-powered program. Remember that you need to put all of this in place. I want to also say that this section of the project is mostly about the organization. Before you then even start attracting the volunteers that will work with you, right? These are the things that you need to do to put yourself in a good place, to be sure and ensure that you have already thought things through and thought about your projects through and thought about your organizations through, so that when you bring in people into your work, the volunteers, you will, they would connect to your goal because they see it very clear. They see it very clear. There is no doubt about what you stand for. In fact, when you do this and do it properly, you attract just the right people. Like I did. I told you guys, I just told you a testimony of how my volunteering worked. And I worked with volunteers almost 5 years before I could employ one. That's the true life story. For a long time before I was able to employ one. And so I learned a lot of things about this. And myself have already also been a volunteer in the project that I'm talking to you about. So I have met a opposition one time, right? So it was a community that had no water. In fact, I wish I could share my screen and show you the water that they drank. The water that they drank was infested with a lot of things, bed droppings, spirogyra. That's the only water in the community. In fact, because they drank that one, sometimes they also dug the ground, just use a hoe and dig the ground in their compound and see if they can get some water. Sometimes there is water, but it's really floody. And when it rains, it's just so bad. The situation was bad, right? So we're able to raise some money to build a borehole, which is drinkable water for this community. It was so exciting. I was so happy because there was a lot of diseases that came from drinking that water, especially children. They've experienced cholera and even kids dying from drinking that dirty water, right? And think about some of the other environmental problems that was causing in the community. So, but the community members told us, they said that no, we should give them money instead so that they can do the projects. That's a sign. Whenever they tell you this, just know that you have something to deal with, right? So this was what they said. And they said, yes, that because they believe we've made money from the project, or that, that some big people, that it was the government. People always have a negative thing with governments because they believe that the government doesn't care about them, or that, you're coming from the government, so you collected money, so you should give us part of that money. But that was not true. This was just a pet project, and I know that it was very hard to raise the money. So my team member said, these people are not serious, that they're not, in fact, he came up because he is from that state, that my team member, he came up with another 2 places we can go. So he said, because these people are not ready, can you imagine, we're trying to help you and you're saying to give you money. Don't you understand what we're trying to do? He was so angry. He didn't tell them directly, but he was just talking about it when we left the place. Yeah. So, but as a leader, you have to exercise some of your leadership skills here, like dialogue, like respectful dialogue. Of course, the easy thing to do is to go. Of course, is to go because they've rejected you. Hello, they rejected you and said that if you won't give them money, yes, they don't care. You should give them money to take care of their own problem. And in another situation, another community told us that they know the problems they have. And it was just very, very unrelated to, it was more of something, will I say, a selfish thing. So they will come up with many different things, but respectful dialogue, patience, and other leadership skills will help you. So what we did in the case, we just left them that day because the heat was hot and everything was hot. It was not the right time to try to solve it. So you have to have the wisdom to know when to engage in that type of discussion and when not to. So we told them that we'll be going today and that they should set up a meeting. That no problem, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So you're saying you guys want money. The truth is we can't give you money, but put up your council members, the king of the community and the council members. Let's have a meeting tomorrow. That's just what I told them. So maybe in their mind, they thought we were going to agree. But I had a different plan altogether. I said, just give us a time to come. And they created a meeting and they had everybody, the decision makers. So the stakeholders were all involved. And I started with my story. I told them a story. I told them a fake story of their situation. So I just pretended and told them. And told them of their own situation. And I just said, there is this community I want to tell you about. This community had a water problem. I used a different location, different names. I told them we work in communities. So that was how we met that community. We saw that dirty water was killing their children. We also saw that the community was dumping refuse in the same water that they are drinking. And we learned that there was a fundamental problem inside the community, at least with education about environment. In fact, in the first place, not to be dumping dirt into the water. So we wanted to educate them, teach them strategies for better waste management so they don't put dirt into their water. And also we provided a borehole. We wanted to provide a borehole for them. This borehole was going to provide clean water, reduce deaths, reduce maternal mortality, and all of the things that negative dirty water was causing for them in the community. So I told them that community rejected what we wanted to do for them because they thought that if they are giving money, they will do it better. I think they wanted to do something with farming. You know, they wanted that money to do something about farming and buying hoes and to distribute to farmers. So I told I told our new friends that the community rejected our idea, and that 1 year later we heard that even more babies died from the dirty water. And they were like, wow, seriously? And they were also sober. They already knew what I was trying to drive at. So after telling them this story, they were just so sober, nobody said anything. So I then started my respectful dialogue. I told them the goal of the program. I told them my story. I told them where I came from. I told them why our team was doing what we were doing, going around the communities, risking ourselves, going to places with poor security to just come and do something for free after suffering to raise the money. I told them that, and that the benefits of the project include helping your children. We're trying to do something for you. That in the next 1 year, you will record improvement, reduction in those diseases by 80% within the next 1 year. Why? Because of access to clean water. They didn't even, you see, after I finished saying that conversation, nobody interrupted what I said. Everyone was calm. Everyone was calm and it was just magical. When I finished talking, the king of the community now spoke up and apologized for how they have received us 2 days before. It was as if they were almost crying. In fact, the way their faces do is as if they wanted to cry because they felt so guilty. And they were shocked at how you see, the way I presented the story back to them. I told them their own story back to them and they couldn't imagine it, that is this what we're trying to do? How can we almost allow money to just, push away a sustainable project that could help the health of our children? That's an example of a respectful dialogue because it was easy to leave that community. We had other communities to go. But unfortunately, if you leave the community, you have not learned a leadership lesson. You have also not passed on, you have not exercised your leadership skills. You don't really have any result of how that you can talk about how you surmounted an opposition. For those here applying for the Mandela Fellowship, that's one of the questions you have there as well. How did you deal with the problem? So I'm trying to say it's all interconnected. Once you're trying to create a program, you have to think in advance some of things like this that could happen. So I hope that story was inspiring. And as we go along, let us now talk about setting your goals and objectives for that project. Now, a goal can be short-term or long-term, right? A goal is that big thing you want to do. So for instance, in my project where I provided a cassava factory for widows, I had a goal. My goal was, I said it before, to create this factory. And then I had like a 6 months timeline to do it because I was doing it as a youth corps member where there is a timeline. But ideally, it's just basically like a 1-year program so that I could implement that project and do the M&E. Yeah, so mine was a 1-year goal, which is a short-term goal. Now, what is a long-term goal? A long-term goal is an extensive plan that you want to achieve between 3 to 5 years. So long-term goals are basically measured between 3 to 5 years or even more. But short-term goals are less than 1 year, right? Or in some cases, 1 to 3 years or 1 to 2 years. So after you have done all these things you're meant to do whilst designing your program, you have to set a goal. Okay, we determine the need assessment. We know what the community wants. We've even checked for some of our colleagues, youth corporate colleagues, or some colleagues in churches. We've also brought together the community leaders and the church leaders. So now we want to determine what this community wants. The example that we're using in this community is unemployment. So now you have to create a goal for your unemployment program you want to solve in this community. Remember, you're trying to create a volunteer-powered program. In the next couple of sessions we have in the coming days, you will see how to even do that better when it's time to involve the volunteers and all of that. So you have to write your big goal. Your big goal can be guided by your essential question. Not really, excuse me, sorry about that, because the essential question is more of the overall organization, but your goal is really the project goal, that project for the community, that volunteer powered project for the community. So you have to think about, why do you want a volunteer program? What is volunteer program? Volunteer program is a project you want to run for a community in which you will use volunteers to execute because you don't have funding for paid engagements, yeah? So by volunteers, we mean actually leading the project. You have a director for communications, you have a representative in the community. In my program, we call it village mentor. You have a village mentor from the community side, all of them are volunteers. You have someone who's running social media, you have somebody who is doing this and doing that. So it's like an entire packaged program, but run by volunteers because they are united by a common goal. Of course, we're going to go into that in the coming sessions. Now, you have to outline why you want the program. Of course, it's usually because of the problem you've identified. And maybe you want volunteers to power it because you wanted youths of like-mindedness, or you did not have funding for paid employment, or even if you had funding for paid employment, you wanted to create a community of passionate workers. Sometimes volunteers are really passionate because they're not doing it for money, right? So even if you have a funded program, you do give a stipend to those volunteers. You have to think about when you will launch the volunteer program. You have to write these things down, what I'm saying. In fact, from the beginning of the slide, you have to be, make notes about this thing. I'm saying that when you're designing the program, you will be writing down these things, yeah? You have to think about when you will launch the program, what time. And now that we're talking about this, it reminds me of my specific situation at the moment. We have just moved to, our company have just moved to a community, a very interesting community in Lagos, right? And I've already identified a problem in this community. I just don't know why I do that, but it's because I walk on the streets every day and I've just seen some things that I don't like. And I've started to think, in fact, I've already approached the local government people in charge of that area to talk about it and to talk about what I want to do, right? And they're so excited, they're just so happy. You see, government people always like when people bring ideas to them to do. Anyway, but this is what I did. And why did I mention that? Because I have fixed a date. Initially, I was thinking about when we will run the project that we want to do, but if you do not put a date to your goal, you're just taking a walk. You're just, if you have a goal in mind of what to do, and you do not have a timeline or a date to do that, to achieve that goal, you're just, there's something I can't remember the exact thing I was going to say there. Not just taking a walk, but it's just any goal without a deadline is not a goal. It's just a dream, or yes, that's the word. It's just you're just dreaming. And what do we understand by dreaming? You're just there wasting time. Without a goal, you don't have anything to work towards. Without a deadline or a date to accomplish your goal, you're just taking a walk. You're just dreaming, right? You're just dreaming because there's nothing you're working towards, and you can change your mind at any time. It has happened to me before. So you can just change your mind at any time because, of course, there's no goal, but by the time there's no date, by the time you put a date to your goal, now you can start working towards it. Now you can draft your objectives. Now you have something to work towards, and you are bounded and you are forced to perform only disciplined action. Because you have a purpose, you have something you want to achieve in advance, you take disciplined action that will yield result toward that goal. That way you don't waste any time. That way you just know your boundaries, you just know what you want to do. So guys, I advise you, to everyone listening, please put a date on the goal. That thing you want to do right here and now, put a date to it. That's in so and so time I want to achieve this. So because I wanted to work fast, I put our program 17th October. And so every week I have something I want to do toward that goal, right? Toward that goal. So that when you get to the date and you look and see that, wow, there's two more things I needed to do, you can just shift it a little bit. But don't say, oh, how can I put a date to it? But I don't even know if I can finish doing what I need to do before then. I don't think I can finish what I need to do before then. I can't put a date. That's wrong. In fact, that's a ploy. That plot is just going to delay you. It's better you put the date, and then when you get to the 2 days before the date, take an inventory of what you have done toward the goal. And if you still need like 2 more things you want to do, then push the date maybe next week. Just keep adding days. Don't ever say, oh, well, okay, we just want to postpone the program indefinitely. Maybe we'll do it next year, sometime next year. No, that's wrong. So that is a very important point. You have to think about who will be responsible for running the volunteer program. You as the project leader, do you want to run it, or do you want to assign somebody to be in charge of recruiting your volunteers, or or running that very project that you have designed, that employment program? You have to put a name to it. Just like adding dates, you have to put a name to everything. In my organization, we launched what we call the Climate Leadership Fellowship, which this is 2nd year, and we are currently on the 3rd cohort right now. For 3 months, we have fellows who are learning about climate change and who adopt a school to start teaching climate change. So our fellows are the program is currently on now. I remember that when we designed this program, right, when I first brought the idea out of my head, before I shared it with my team members, I started out with a PowerPoint presentation. Let me tell you people how I do it. And I just wrote the big name on the first page. So I started thinking about it. I just wrote everything down that I thought about the program. So it's important to do that so that you can look at it. It's like your goal. It's like the vision that you have. So that you stare at it, you look at that thing you've written down, ideas will begin to pop into your head of what to do next. But when I do this with the PowerPoint presentation, I just give the subtitles. And so usually, immediately I think of the idea, I assign roles immediately with the 5 people that I have, yeah? So I just assign the roles, social media, so I put the name. And after I've done this, I'll think about it again for the rest of that week to think about what to add to what I've drafted. Then I have a meeting with my team members. This one is a virtual program, so there's no community to have a stakeholder assessment, yeah? So I've already done surveys to figure out that the climate education was important and an intensive one, yeah, so that the trainees can go ahead and train others. So whilst adding dates to your program, add the people who will run it. If you don't have the people who run it, then that's a different case. You can just run your program yourself. Maybe after that first pilot, you will then be able to work with the volunteers that will be on the program. How will you know when the program is developed? So you have to put a metric when you're drafting your goals to identify when you know that, okay, this program is done and ready. For instance, in the program we designed, Climate Leadership Fellowship, that I just talked about, open to Nigerians in the 6 geopolitical zones, right? 30 fellows is what we work with. We choose from 6 geopolitical zones. So now those are all the things you will plan inside your volunteer engagement, yeah, where you want your participants to come from. But in this case, we're talking about one community. So let's focus on this one community. But you need to put a metric in your write-up to say that when this is done, then I know that we're ready to launch, yeah? So probably I give an assignment to my program manager. My program, we have a program administrator, program coordinator. So as soon as, let us say, Paul has finished conducting this survey, as soon as Paul has finished drafting the agenda, then the ICT guy, because it's a virtual program, we have an entire platform for learning. As soon as Emmanuel, who is the ICT guy, has finished creating the learning programs, has finished updating the learning programs on the site. As soon as I have done my part, I also teach climate change. I have courses on it. As soon as I've uploaded my courses on climate change, then the checklist, you have to draft a checklist 1 to 10 to ensure that everything has been done. You've gotten the volunteers, you've aligned your team members together, you have the stakeholders on board, the community chief promised to give you some money. Have you received the money? The community chief promised to give a land. Have you received the land? In my case, for the volunteer program I did as a corporate, they gave me a land at their markets, close to their markets, yeah? So you have to think about all this. Have you already involved some of the beneficiaries for your unemployment program? Have they come on board? Have you secured a hall, a space for your training? Yes, so after you tick all this that aligns to the program, then you know that your program is ready. You have to do this so that you'll be able to know. You have to have this kind of checklist. Don't just think of it in your head. I tell you the truth, we make that mistake. I've also made the mistake before where I just designed it in my head because it's my program. So I figured out that I already know what is supposed to happen, right? I already know how to know when it happened. No, you have to make a checklist so that just not for you, but your team members can also see what has happened and know the right time to launch that program, the right time to put out an application out for young people to come and do your employment training, the right time to paste flyers around the community for your employment training. That checklist is very important. So this is what it's about, to develop your goals and objectives. Objectives are just now smaller things you need to do to achieve the goal. Now, I said that in the place where we visited, we found a community problem, right? That social and so things is not happening in this community. There's lots of people that are unemployed, and there is a pattern we've observed. That's the goal. So we want to solve this by creating an employment management program. This is an example. So that's like the goal. So what are the objectives? A visit to the councillor or to the local government chairman. A visit to having conversations with the team members to determine which hall we're going to use. Thinking about how to recruit the young people we want to train. Are we going to let this, are we going to let the local government people handle this since it's in their local government? Or are we going to use our own way to find the people through social media or the people in our community that we serve? Right, so those are like the objectives. Objectives are just the little actions you take to reach the goal, right? So that is very important. Good. You have to establish job descriptions. So I don't know why it's called job description. It's really basically, what do you want the volunteers that you want to bring aboard to have? Are there specific skills you want them to have? So we need to write that down. See, when you write things down, it brings clarity. Because I know that a lot of young people like to think of things in their head because they feel that, they just know what they're doing. And if they see the person, they'll know. Write it down. When you write it down, you're able to even edit it later and put something else. Unlike when you think about it. When you think about it, you miss the chance to fine-tune it. You're not able to fine-tune it, but you just be thinking different ideas. And so many things get lost in that process, yeah? So you have to draft a community volunteer job description, right? So it helps to clarify what is expected of the people you want to bring on board from the very beginning. It can also help to reduce conflicts that may arise between the staff and volunteers because you wrote things down and they are very clear, right? So everyone knows what is expected of them. When volunteers come on board, they know what is expected of them, yeah? So that way it reduces conflict. So you have to ask the following question when you're trying to design that job description. So when we say job description, don't really think of it as a job. You know, the word job there made it look like it's a paid employment. So you can even say volunteer expectations. So you can call it a volunteer expectation, establishing your volunteer expectation. But the reason it's also called job description is because you can detail what you want that volunteer to do, which is like a job. Of course, it's a job. It's just that they are doing it because of their passion. So just take note of these things: volunteer expectations and job description of what you want the people you're bringing on board to do. So, and another way to think about it is that you have to ask this question: is this an actual job? Of course, you already know that you're trying to bring in volunteers. So of course it's a job, it's just not a paid one, yeah? Then you can ask, can this job be done on a part-time basis? Do you want your volunteers to show up every day? And how long is your program? Figure out how long your employment training in the community will last, so that you can know how much time you want to engage your volunteers in. It's always important that when you're not paying volunteers, to just, you know, as much as possible, let it be part-time, yeah? Let it be part-time so that volunteers can use some few days in the week to give feedback or to write a review about the program. So as much as possible, let your volunteers help you to do with things that do not take up a lot of their time or a lot of their money, especially their money. If the volunteers have to spend money, that's good too. Some volunteers will do that without anything, but it's important that as much as possible, you provide the support that they need in terms of cash, right? So you have to think about what time required for training and supervision, right, of the volunteer, yeah? Because you need to do an initial volunteer training for them so that they get to see what the purpose of the organization is about, and how to connect the work that you want to do in the communities. So right about now, we're rounding up now, and I want you to write for me your essential questions so that I can just review 2 of them before we do the question and answer. But I don't know if Mr. Samuel thinks that that's a good idea. I don't think we also have enough time.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Some have submitted theirs on the chat. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So some have, I think I've seen 1 or 2 on the chat box. So possibly you can look at that and see exactly what whether it's in line with what you want. Okay,
I'll look at that, sir, as soon as we round up. So these are the questions you need to ask when trying to determine your volunteer expectations or job descriptions. And then the next thing you have to ask if the expectation, what you expect from the volunteer, considers their interest and the skills they bring to the table. You have to think about your volunteers according to what they can bring to the table. So what do you need to be achieved in the project? Before now, you have already written down what you want to be achieved in the project. That will guide you to assess and bring in your volunteers on board according to the skills that they have that relates to the project. Are there possibilities for volunteer satisfaction during this project? Yes, because initially your volunteers must connect to your mission, right? So there are people who are passionate about that. You have to ensure that there are people who are passionate about what you do. That's why initially, like we talked about, we would have created that your value proposition, the strategic plan, and what you're about, including an annual reports, right? So that you can measure volunteer satisfaction at the end. You can do this with a survey as well, right? So print a survey and just ask them what they thought about the program, what they thought about their engagement. Remember that you're doing all this, ensure that you have a beneficial program for your community and also for the volunteers. So moving on, I think that's the end. I think this will be the last thing. Excuse me, let me check. Okay. There you go. So that brings us to the close of the first unit. We're going to continue this course next week. But in the meantime, since we have about 35 more minutes, I will now go ahead to look at the essential.
Not next week or Thursday.
Today? Okay, Thursday. Thank you, sir. I keep saying next week. Thank you, sir. So remember what I said about the essential questions. The essential question is the question that you're asking so that you can think of the answers. An essential question causes you to bring about your value proposition. For me, I told you guys an example that for my organization, my essential question was, how can I provide support for 200 widows so that they can be what's that thing they say, members of the society, so they can be useful members of the society. I found widows in the community. I also found a solution within their community. So how can I utilize that? So that thing is just one question. So I'm trying to look now to see if there's anybody that answered the question. So good. So I'm just really seeing comments and contributions. Somebody said Agrarian and Farm Machineries Construction Company is the proposed name to harness the agricultural process and make it easier by designing and constructing machines. That's all good. That's really good. Remember that what we're talking about is a community-based project which you're trying to design so that you can utilize volunteers to establish your first pilots, right? But thank you for writing this. Thank you everyone for all the things you wrote. I'd like you to do that as an exercise. I can see that none of you included an essential question. Somebody just sent in one, said, let me see, he said, how can child sexual abuse be prevented on a grassroots level in schools, churches, and communities? Good, that's good. So now this is a very good question, which then forces the asker, I don't know if there's a word like that, the questioner or the person who is asking, to think about how to solve that. So now this essential question, how can child sexual abuse be prevented on a grassroots level? So now you know that it's on the community level from the beginning, thinking about the youngest level of school in the hierarchy or in the community base, like a village, before you get to a local government, before you get to a state. So that kind of thing is meaning of grassroots. So this question prompts the person to think about how that can happen. So now, for instance, this person can say, should we do early education to parents or to the students or to the kids, right? Because then you're talking about a problem that is on the grassroots. You think about it from all of these sides, from the parent side, from the child side, from the school side, from the church's side, and from the community side. What are the things that can happen in all these different sides? So it can help you draft your first idea or your first program of what you want to do. That becomes your goal. Remember, we talked about goal. So that now becomes the goal of this person, because you have to figure out how you will do this. You try to bring it. Now, your essential question will help you to know people to bring on board. Do you want to bring a child psychologist on board to help design programs for the children? You want to bring in a counselor for the parents to help think about that aspect of this kind of problem and offer guidance on your material for parents. Overall, everything you would do will try to answer to this question. That's just the goal, right? So that your essential question is a guide to how to design your problem. Your solutions, excuse me. To how to outline your solution to that problem. So the person who asked this question could start with a first pilot already, right? That would do a project for either parents or teachers or the entire community, so that this person can now learn from the first pilot to see what else can be done. It's always important to establish, to run a pilot of anything. Don't try to make it perfect. Just put a pilot out there. It just helps to speed up your process of fine-tuning and finalizing your plan. Because if you wait to finalize the plan, I know that many young people make the mistake. I've made that mistake before, where I was just waiting for things to be perfect. And I was waiting for funding. The fund never came. And it was interesting that it was after I have written my essential question and waited for funding for 2 years, or for about 1 year, 1 year plus, I then decided to look at my inventory and see what I have on ground. So I'm going to get back to the essential questions. I'm going to quickly get back to that, but I wanted to share now that what you should do after you have written your essential question is to try to implement a first pilot. I can see there's a hand up. I'm going to get to that soon. Is to try to implement a first pilot. Don't wait for funding to do that. Please, don't wait for funding to do that. Do that at once. So what I did is, after waiting for 1 year for a project I did, not from my volunteer side, because I have a company as well, after waiting for money for 2 years, I was just so sure that I could get money for this project. After I've spent years thinking about it, how can people not quickly see the goal? How can they not quickly catch the vision, this vision I'm trying to talk about, so that they can give me the money? Guys, that did not work. I did not get any funds. I was so down and sad. In the second year, that was 2018, I decided to implement a pilot. I thought to myself, what I need for this training, it was a technical engineering training. What I needed for this training is a hall. And I also needed to partner with someone else who would teach the course. She's an engineer, whilst I'm not, but I was passionate about solar advancement in Nigeria, and I designed that program. So I did one thing. I looked for the things that I had. I had a solar entrepreneurship handbook that was given to me by a Canadian. That handbook is a training manual. Wow. So I have something that I can use to teach. Hello. And I am an entrepreneurship teacher. I know I can teach the entrepreneurship side. Why I looked for somebody who could then teach the engineering side. Guys, to launch your project, think about collaborating with somebody who can do that. I know you've heard that before, but it's serious. It's something that can be done. It usually helps you to launch that idea faster than you could do it on your own. Think about partnering with somebody who can bring something to the table. Don't just say, come, let's partner. No, say, come, let's partner. You're going to teach the engineering aspect of this course, whilst I'll teach the entrepreneurship aspect and work on setting up the hall for the training. So I looked at my inventory. I saw that I knew somebody who could give me a hall for free. Meanwhile, the training was a paid one. I'm trying to tell you how you can launch your pilot after asking your initial essential question for the lady who talked about child sexual abuse, right? So we were lucky where we created our first training. Now, guys, let me tell you what happened after that. Something remarkable happened, and I learned from it. Remember that I've been looking for money all this time, and I was waiting. So I implemented that first project, and it went well. 14 people paid money. 14 people paid 30,000 naira a long time ago for our training. And I was like, wow, okay, looks like there's a demand here. So I planned another training with my partner. We did 4 more that year. I was able to raise funding to buy the equipment I needed for that project from the profits made. Remember, I was initially looking for funding. Did you see how I now raised the money that I needed? It's interesting. See, it can work. It can work this way. So I raised the money that I needed, and then I registered the company properly. In 2019, something remarkable happened after 1 year. A company reached out to us because they wanted to fund the program. See, guys, that's how it happens. Remember that I was settled in and I was trying to look for money for this project. So what if I looked for money and I was just waiting and just looking for money and just really chilling? You know, money will come when it will come. If it's for those that are religious, they'll say if it's God's will, it will happen. No, you have to take action, right? So the fund that I was looking for came. The fund came because there was traction to be seen. The time that I collaborated with people, those who offered me money, they wanted me to train 50 women and they were going to pay for it. Now that's a lot of money for me. I was so happy because I did not stay and wait until I finished planning the program. So sometimes we require traction to start, to launch. So I hope that story was helpful. I will now go to the chat. So launch your first pilots and learn from that. From my first pilot program, I learned about the kind of courses that interested people in that engineering side of things. I also learned that the fact that most women did not like attending that program. From your first pilots, you're going to take inventory and see how you can properly structure that program. I learned that women were not very interested, and I started thinking about how to get more women interested. So that's what your essential question helps you to accomplish. And someone else said, in order to actualize agricultural sustainability here in Nigeria, with prevailing security challenges at the local community, how can local stakeholders be carried along to address situations? That's also okay. So it means means from your essential question, Olarewaju, it means that your plan for the community is to get stakeholders to be carried along, right? So what you want to accomplish in this community is just for stakeholders to be carried along. That's very good, but it's important to be more detailed than that. Your goal can really be more than that. For instance, your initial goal is to actualize agricultural sustainability. So you have to break it down so that it's really simple, right? So are you saying that you want to promote food security so that more people have access to food, or that young people are involved in agribusiness so that there can be availability of food? And so you're now saying, I want to involve local stakeholders. So make sure that your essential question tackles a problem, right? Tackles a direct problem. So now, for instance, your essential question could really be, how can I work with youth, more youth, to get into agribusiness so that there can be food security, meaning so that there can be availability of food? And how can we get stakeholders to work on this? So that your involvement of stakeholders is really to help achieve more agribusinesses from youth to achieve food security. So the big problem here is the food security. So your big problem is not really just the agricultural sustainability, but food security. That way it's tangible. You want local stakeholders to support you to train more agribusiness people, or to provide incentives for agribusinesses so that people are willing to start agribusinesses, so that it tackles what the main problem is, which is unavailability of food or food security. But that's a very wise one. Thank you for asking it. And that basically brings us to the end of the conversation. Thank you guys for listening. And I can see there's some hands up for the, some hands up for questions.
We'll take it up from there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.
All right, let's quickly go to Oka. Oka, please unmute yourself. Oshogo, you can also get set, and then Samson or Badari.
Good day, everybody. Thank you, the presenter. My question is, we know that non-profit organization can't run without volunteers, and today we are handling volunteer management. So my question is, will all volunteers have a role, job role?
Good. Oh, Mr. Samuel.
Please go ahead and answer it.
Okay. You said, do all volunteers have a job role? Was that the question?
Yeah.
Do all volunteers have a, yeah?
Must.
Good. Thank you for asking that. Now, the reason why you're drafting a job role is simple. You know, that's why I called it another word. I called it a different name: volunteer expectations. What do you want from the volunteer? What do you expect from the volunteer that you want to bring on board for your employment program? Do you want a volunteer with a certificate on entrepreneurship, right? So you write that down in your volunteer expectation, because you want this volunteer to be able to teach employment, whatever, in the program that you have designed. Maybe employment strategies, or how to present a CV, or how to write a good CV. So the job is not really, so it's more of to help you understand what you expect from your volunteers. So you have to write out a volunteer expectation or job description. The reason it's called a job description is because you need to figure out what that volunteer will do. In your program, there are things that you need for volunteers to do. Writing it down means that you're now writing out that thing that you want them to do. So that's the meaning of a job description. So yes, you need to have a description for your volunteers so that it's not just vague. That way, volunteers can give you their best because it is clear to them what they want to do. So when you just say volunteers come, so that if anything comes up, I'll just tell you, don't worry, just be on standby. If something comes, I'll tell you what to do. It's chaotic, and maybe after a while of not being engaged, that volunteer might even leave. Do you get what I say? So that volunteer might even leave, but when there is a guide on what to do, expectation from the volunteer, or a description of what you want them to do in that program, like a job description, volunteers are guided on what to do. The program managers also are very clear on what they expect from the volunteer. And overall, you're able to track the progress of the program because you can see if people met their expectation. You can tick during your survey and check that everyone met their expectation. Overall, you'll be able to track the progress of the project and you'll be able to see where you make changes and where next you need to make changes. So that's very important.
Listen. Thank you very much. Oshogbo, over to you.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for everything you've shared with us. I have two questions. Earlier, when you were sharing your experience in the community management engagement, you said that sometimes involving the stakeholders, you also allow them to have a stake, like they want to be really involved. What about an instance where they really want to take over the initiative completely, but they are leaving you to that side where you just make provision? How do you handle that? They know it's a problem that you've identified, but they want to take over solving it solely by themselves, but you know the gaps and what you intend to measure at the end of the day. If you let it to them, they will not be able to, you won't be able to monitor it the way you want to monitor it.
The question is clear.
Yes, sir. The second question is, on the pilot project, there are so many things you want to do. The first pilot project needs money and you need to start anyway. Okay, if the money is not coming and the funding is not coming, is it that you're supposed to scale down on the first pilot, whereas you want to also make it, you want to scale even being on the first one? Are you supposed to scale down or abort in this instance? What do you do when money is not? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you for that. Yes, thank you, sir. So very, very simple. Remember, it is your community-based project for the first question, right? It is your community-based project. You are the young leader coming into the community to bring about that solution. The best way is to work together with them alongside. So indeed, that is an example of the position I talked about. Remember, I shared an example of the position. So it's important to engage in respectful dialogue to explain why it is that you need to work together, how it is that you can't just leave it for them. I do know that some communities do that because they want to run, and it's really a problem because you cannot account for your funding. If you were funded for that project, it's not even permitted by your funders. So determine if the community is still a good destination, or what's the word, for implementation. Determine if this, you see, that's why it's very important to do all of the things we talked about in choosing your community and in finding the problems to solve. Make sure that you go over this before you even bring the idea. Remember that we talked about that. Before you bring the idea to them, make sure that they have ticked all of those boxes. Carry them along so that you can get the vibes of what they really want. Overall, the point is that no, don't leave your project to them or give them the money to do the project. No, it is a partnership. They're meant to bring something to the table by providing you their willingness and their guidance and their support, and you are meant to bring the other to the table. Eventually, it's the partnership. So you're meant to work together with them, not leave the project to them.
All right.
I hope that that's helpful. And then the second question asks, if you don't have money, should you start that first pilot that you want to start, or because you're not able to do it in the scale that you want because you don't have the money? Exactly, that was what I talked about. Start small. That's just, you see, when you implement the first pilot, it's not really a project, it's more of a learning moment. Yeah, it's more, you just want to learn. Firstly, you might want to find out if people will respond well to that idea. So you should not do a big project at a time. In fact, I don't think you will get the money to do a big project. So of course, if you don't have money, yes, scale it down and just implement a little bit. So if you wanted to do a training for 100 people on employability, like we're saying, just train only 5 people, right? Train 5 people. Because you don't have money to rent a hall, use that little space in your house to do the training, or do it on Zoom. For resources, you do have resources from the Yale Network or the American Center for Resources, right? So just try out a little pilot that does not involve money so that you can get the responses from people and figure out what people want. So when you don't have money to implement a large scale project, which was your question, implement a small scale one, learn from it before you can gain traction to implement a large one. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that's true. we now go on to Samson Obadare. But before Obadare speaks, I mean, if you are bringing a project and these people said they would like to take over, why didn't they solve the problem before you came? They knew the problem. If now they know the solution, why didn't they solve the problem before you came? So Samson Obadare, over to you, or mute yourself. Samson. Okay.
You can hear me?
Yes, go ahead quickly.
Part of the questions I wanted to ask has been answered already. Somebody from Osogbo, they've already answered it, and I'm okay with that. Thank you so much.
All right, so we go to American Corner in Maiduguri. Unmute yourself, please.
All right, I'll do that now.
Good morning, everyone, please. My viewers are asking a question on this issue of community service, that is trying to meet the needs of the community where your NGO wants to operate or work. And as the speaker was speaking, she shared with us on a community that wanted money rather than instituting a project. So the question we are asking is that in issues like this is a community that is very, very poor. They can hardly find things to eat. Life is so difficult for them. And they want you to help them financially. Well, here you are talking about putting a water or something for them. In this issue or things like this, what do you do? To my speaker, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. So remember that you're a community-based organization, right? You run a non-profit, you're not even making money for yourself. You go around in communities looking for how to solve little problems that you can solve. And based on your goals, like my project, based on the goals of our project, part of it was is environmental. Part of what we do is to improve environment, and then dirty water in communities leading to diseases was part of our goal, right? So it was something that was part of our goal. And it was somebody from the community who called for help to say that in our community, we don't have water, please come and help us, right? So when we got there, we found that the community leaders had other ideas. I want to stress that everybody needs money, okay? Every community you go, they need money. In fact, you need money right now, don't you? We all need money. It's just for fun. But so they will eventually tell you about that money they need. But you've seen that children are dying in this community, and you want to solve the cause of death, which is to replace the dirty water with a clean one. And so the issue was resolved, as you heard in my story, because we helped them to understand, and they admitted that they were being a little bit greedy. And so that they apologized about that and said that we are welcome to do the project, because we're able to help them see how our program will restore clean water and reduce diseases or deaths of children. So I think your question is, why didn't we give them the money? Why did we then give them water instead of money? Because providing water was part of our goals, and it was because we saw that there were deaths happening in the community. We thought it was more important to stop the cause of death instead of giving them money to use in what we do not know. So if after we engaged them in respectful discussion and they insisted, we would then leave the community because they are not ideal. Hope that's helpful.
But the question is, you are bringing water to their community.
Yeah.
So the ongoing from the beginning, they said, look, we can't even live. We need money to eat. So this issue of water, we are not interested in water now.
Okay. Yeah.
Let us eat first before you now help us clean our water and give us training. So what should they do? That's
wow. Question. Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for clarifying that. I didn't get that part. Wow, that is okay. See, that's another deal altogether, right? So in that instance, you can decide if you would continue with the water project since it's something you have funding for at the moment. Remember, you're at the organization, and maybe a funder has given you the money to implement water projects. So it means that this community is not the ideal community for your program. But thinking about it from the other line, apart from maybe you didn't have funding, you can talk to them and then see what you can do for them. It's always important to involve stakeholders. Remember, before you go to this community, you have already filled all of those things you were supposed to do to select the community. So before this time, this was just a big example that I gave. Before this time, you have found out that their problem was food. Okay, if it's food, what leads to, why don't you have food? Do you have an income? So do you need a training to get a job? Do you need a job? So you need to, as an NGO or a business person, trace what is the cause of that lack of food. Is it lack of funding? I mean, is it lack of money, or is it poverty? And then you can see what the local government in the community is doing to solve poverty. See how to work with them. You can, okay, let me tell you this one for free, guys. You cannot solve the problem of poverty alone. So if they don't have food, if you have some money to give them, and it's not even advisable to give people money for food. So you need to trace what the root cause is and see how to solve that. Maybe right, it's still training you will still need to provide, right? So I can't tell you to give them food, no, because if you give them food, it will finish and then they will need it again. You need to give them a means of livelihood. I told you that in my project, I saw widows who were poor and they also didn't have food. There were 200 of them. I built a cassava factory. I believe they can make money from processing cassava. That's one, they were able to make money. Two, they were able to get food. So by building the cassava factory, which means tackling that problem of no food or poverty from the roots, I was able to generate employment for these women and also that same food they were asking. That's what you should do when you come across this kind of community that tells you, oh, what we want is food, we don't even want you to build road for us. Establish something for them that can help them make money, but talk to them and work together with them so that you can do a project that belongs to them, that they feel is their own.
All right, thank you very much. Quickly, Benicity, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am. Glory. Yeah, here's my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Here's my question. In a situation where you have to, you already set up a meeting with those stakeholders already, yeah? And you realize that these stakeholders in this community, they don't understand your language. So you manage to get one of your volunteer members who would help you translate what you're trying to communicate to help you speak in the course of that program. And now there's rejection. The entire project being your idea, I believe you are the best communicator that would communicate this idea. So now you set up another meeting where you guys could have a negotiation. How can you best communicate your idea to them in that period of negotiation, since they don't know your language, they don't understand English, they don't know your native language, they don't understand Pidgin. Like I have lived in Lagos for many years. I still do live in Lagos. I work in Lagos professionally. But at the moment I'm in Benin. So I have met people in Lagos that don't understand English. Original indigenous people of Lagos that don't understand English. So how do you communicate your ideas to people like that?
That's a good one. Thank you for that, because that's exactly the problem that I encountered as a copper in 2013 when I was trying to execute the cassava project, like I told you guys. So it's important that you find, so my solution, of course, was finding the interpreter, right? Because they also couldn't, the key target that I had could not understand English, which was the women. So it's important that you find an interpreter that is part of the community. That was what I did. A person that they trust. That was what I did. The pastors and the imams. These two people helped a lot. And they were very passionate about the program themselves. They thought it was something good. So you need to get them to believe your idea or the solution that you were trying to propose. When they believe it, the way they communicate it is different. I tell you, it's magical. The response is going to be magical because I couldn't speak the language. And at all my meetings, I always have these communities, and they were just over happy. They were so overjoyed to create time and to participate. They agreed for us to do meetings at their churches or at their mosque. When we come for these meetings, they are the ones that talk to the women. I noticed that after they talk to the women will just face me and start thanking me. They will kneel down, they will start thanking me after listening to the community member. Right. So I think your question is, you used a member of your team. So you have to use one of them who already understands your passion. That way, you would see that you will be able to pass across your message as if you're the one. I hope that's helpful because that was what I did. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Finally, the Shepherds, whatever, please mute yourself. That's the last question for today.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Gloria, Shepherd's Eye Foundation. Please, based on this need assessment, let's assume you want to conduct a training for teenagers, and what's the best way to know what exactly they want? That's they want.
That's good. In the first place, why did you want to conduct something for teenagers? You yourself should have had something you had in mind. Did you see a problem? Why did you think about that idea? That's how to start. Did you see a problem? Then, with that problem in mind that you saw, let me give you an example because I recently talked to someone who had something similar, but it was a mental health issue for adolescent girls, right? So now that so now you've identified this problem and called it a name. You should always call it a name. Mental health issue faced by girls in this community. That was a premise. And so this person, so now the thing to do next is to find a way to talk to them. Talk to them. So a way to start is to create a survey and publish it online and give it to schools. Give it to parents in your churches. Give it to parents at the mosque to fill or to give to their children to fill. Make sure you have some kind of sample responses that they can just tick, right, in the answer. That way you get an idea of what they want. Remember that you already had a prior idea. It's important to always have something you have had in mind because of the problem you noticed. Maybe teenagers are consuming a lot of TikTok and it has increased depression and it has increased suicide. That's a statement of a problem. Now, what will you do about this? To figure out the best thing to do, you can now conduct this kind of survey that I talked about. You can now talk to parents, talk to people, leaders of churches who are called stakeholders, right? Talk to schools. Schools already have that kind of database that they keep up for the behavior of the teenagers. See if you can get some feedback from them. And that way you can determine what is the best solution after you've heard from parents, from teachers, from schools, and from teenagers themselves. So that's the best way to go about it. I hope that's helpful.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Glory, for this wonderful session. Somebody said in the chat box that your session is electrifying. And you must have shocked the person so much that the person probably has not been able to recover. It's gladdening to see how you have moved, faster in that track for these few years. So thank you very much for your contribution today. Thursday is another day, and I hope all of you are going to join. Remember, this session, this program is a session that is open to any Nigerian. Anybody in Nigeria can take this course. But if you insist you want to get a certificate, that's why we insisted you have to be there physically, in person, at American Spaces. And we're doing that for a purpose. So please, let's have this understanding. I woke up this morning with a request for somebody who gave all the reasons why we have to accept everybody and anybody. One, is very difficult to track. I want to make sure that whoever is going to participate must be supervised. In other words, we must make sure that you are there and you are listening to the lectures. I am listening to the lectures and I'm taking notes, and I'm going to make use of some of this because I need volunteerism management in my organization. So if it's something very valuable to me, then I should be there seated. But if you take it, you are taking from home. Yes, some people will still be very serious, but we can't tell. We can't tell. So that's why we cannot just say, well, because you have logged in, so you have access to the certificate. That certificate actually was not there initially. It was a motivational factor to encourage many people to attend even the program. So please, let's have this understanding. We're not changing the rule in the middle of the game. This is the way we're going to run the show. Thank you, everybody. All the American Spaces, we appreciate you, the directors, for signing in on time and making sure that everybody gets to participate. So before we go, I want to plead with everybody to please put your hands together, jam your hands together for the speaker of today, to encourage her to come next on Thursday. Let's clap. You can see people are clapping even for you. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Friday is, we have a Thursday, and then we also have a program on Friday, all are virtual. Make sure you make it a date with us. Have a wonderful day, and bye for now. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Glory. You are appreciated.